So even though we spent what seemed like an absolute age masking all of this up, we did get quite a bit of black paint coming through onto the binding. So it's just a case now of very, very painstakingly going round and just using a Stanley knife blade to gently scrape off any black that might be on there. It's a slow job. It is quite a skilled job. You need to be very delicate with what you're doing, and it's the kind of thing that takes a little bit of getting used to and a little bit of practice to get it absolutely spot on. And I remember the first few occasions I did this, I did dig into it a little bit and remove a little bit too much in places, but as I've kind of got used to doing it, I've got better and better at it. And I think that's just the main takeaway from this, is it is a skill, and it does take a little bit of time to get it to a good standard. But like anything, a little bit of practice and you can get proficient at it. But I am very happy with the way it's come out. It is looking nice once it's all scraped off and cleaned up. So we can move on with the next stage of this. However, this is going to be a multi-stage process, and it is going to take a little bit of time to get this how I want it. And this 3-tone sunburst, it just felt like such a great idea at the beginning of this project. It seems a little bit more daunting now that I have to actually implement it and make it look good. But we are where we are, so we need to crack on. And the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to clean the bench up, get rid of all this swarf that's lying about, because that's not going to end well if we try and do any more kind of finishing work with that about. I'm going to get this onto the painting stick so I can get it in the vise, and then I'm going to coat everything in a coat of clear. I haven't cleaned off the binding on the top because that's just going to get covered in black when I do the burst, so that's going to need scraping anyway, so there's no point scraping it twice. And in fact, scraping it twice wouldn't be a good idea because you're just removing way too much material that way. So I'm just going to spray over that for the time being. But once I've got this coat of clear on over everything, I'm going to see if there's anything on the top and back that needs filling. There might be a few little bits that need some grain filler. I've got some clear aqua coat to go on then, so we can fill any inconsistencies, get those how we want them. From there, I'm going to probably put another coat of clear on just to seal that all up and just to make sure I've got a nice base coat going on, because if I put any black on where I don't want it, having that clear coat on will give me the opportunity to kind of blend that in and rub it off. If I was to do it straight on top of this stain, I'd be knackered. I wouldn't have any recourse if I didn't get it absolutely spot on the first time, and the chances of me getting it absolutely spot on the first time are probably less than 0. So I need that clear coat on as a bit of an insurance policy. Now what this means is this is going to be a case of give it a coat of lacquer, leave it for an hour or so, give it some aqua coat, leave it for an hour or so, give it some more clear, etc, etc. So this is going to take quite a long time to do, and it's going to be backwards and forwards to the shed, I would imagine, for a couple of days to get it where we need it to be before we can kind of do the final little bit of rubbing down and get the final clear coats on. So I'm going to have to be very patient, but hopefully I can condense this down into one video so we can get the rest of the finishing done on the body, and then we can move on to the next. So as I say, I'll get all of this cleaned up, get it onto the painting stick, and we'll get some clear coats laid down. Okay, and there's a fairly thickish coat of the clear laid down, and hopefully you can see that's actually popped out those colours on that quite nicely. So looking good as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to leave this, like I say, for an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer, just to dry up a little bit, and then I'll give it a good inspection and see if I can see anywhere that needs any grain filling. To be honest, looking at the back, I think it looks okay. And if I just whip it over, I'm not actually sure there's anything on the top that I'm at all concerned about either, but I'll let it dry and then make that kind of final decision when that's happened. Okay, so I'm actually having a little bit of a mare with this. I'll be honest, it's not going the way I would like it to. You might be able to see there's a little bit of blushing on this clear lacquer. It's very cold at the moment here and the lacquer isn't liking that, so there's a kind of a mistiness to it. I'm pretty confident it will come out. It's kind of only in the very top layers, and as this dries and the kind of excess moisture that's causing it kind of comes out of the lacquer, it should clear up nicely, and then when we kind of flat it down and polish it, it should be all good. Just doesn't look quite as good as it should right now. The other problem I'm having is trying to do this burst with a rattle can. I've been doing some experimenting. I've tried creating a template that we can use to mask this and try and get the burst on that way. Hasn't worked. The problem is this can, there's so much volume of paint comes out that it's basically totally uncontrollable, and I wouldn't be able to get the burst that I want on. And I think I can demonstrate here. This is the standard nozzle that comes with the can, and it pumps out loads and loads of paint, and there's no way that you can do a burst with that. I have tried using a different nozzle off a different can, which gives a cone kind of pattern to the spray, and that's just as bad. Way too much volume of paint. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this, and it is a step away from the ethos of what we said we were going to try and achieve with this build. However, I think it is the right thing to do because it will give me the finish I want. We can't compromise that. And also, it's a relatively cost-effective way. So if you haven't got a compressor, which is an expensive bit of kit, you could use this method, because I'm going to use an airbrush, and you can actually run these airbrushes off compressed air that comes out of a can, much like a rattle can. So it's a kind of a halfway house between what I said I was going to do and what I'm eventually going to have to do. Now, I'm not going to run this off a can. I will run it off my airline, but it's just a kind of a demonstration that we aren't going too far away from what we said we were going to do. Now, I've had a look on Amazon, and these airbrushes or something very similar can be bought for effectively the same price as one of these. Obviously, you'd have to buy some paint as well, but that will just give you an understanding of it's not kind of prohibitively expensive to do it this way. Luckily, I've got some black nitrocellulose paint left over from another build, so I'm going to break that out, get a little bit into the spray gun, and once I've masked all this up again, we'll just then work our way around and put the burst on using that method. And so with that all masked up, I'm just going to kind of generally, I'm going to start at the outside and kind of start working my way around with quite a light pass. And then start working my way in from that. Until I get it where I need it. And I think at this end, that's pretty much all we need. So I'll make it a bit more pronounced around this end. And then from a distance, I'm just going to kind of soften that edge up a little bit. And I think that's looking good for the back, so we'll get this turned over and do the same on the top as well. And I honestly believe that this is the correct thing to do. There is no way on earth I could have done this using a spray can. But I don't see this as a failure, because I think what we were trying to do with this whole build is kind of establish what could and couldn't be done. And I think we've clearly established that doing a burst with a spray can probably isn't that doable. And I'm kind of liking the look of that, so again I'm just going to go from a distance and kind of shade that in. I'm not too concerned about this bit because it's all going to get covered up with a scratch plate. So I'll just give that a few minutes to dry up a little bit and we can take the tape off and see what it looks like. Okay, so I've given that a little bit of time just for that paint to dry up a touch. So I think we can fairly safely start pulling off the masking tape. Kind of get a bit of a reveal of what it's going to look like. And I have to say, I think that looks really, really nice. I'm very, very pleased with the way that that's gone on. There is a little bit of overspray kind of made its way onto this kind of clear element of it, but what I can do is just leave this now for a little while to kind of dry up a little bit, and then I can do a little bit of light sanding around the area that I want it to be clear, and that will just remove that overspray and it will look very nice. I think I'm happy with that, I have to say. And if we just turn that over again, there is a little bit of overspray on there. Let me just give that a wipe with a damp tissue. You can probably see it brings up quite a lot of black off there. But we can get that off, we can remove that and make it look a lot better. Now, the next stage in this is to scrape back the edge of the binding, just to reveal that white edge. However, I can't do it just yet, because whilst this is kind of touch dried, it is still going to be very soft. And if I try and clean that up with a blade now, it will drag and kind of leave a very messy edge. Conversely, I can't leave it too long, because if I do, it will become brittle, and when I try and scrape it off, it will crack. So there's a little bit of a balancing act to achieve here as to when we get this scraped off, but it's not going to be just yet. I would probably think tomorrow or the day after I can do that. So I think that's as good a place as any to leave this one now. I'm very happy with the way it's looking. Despite having a few setbacks on the way, I think we're coming together quite nicely on this one. So I'll leave this one here for the time being. I'll join you back in a couple of days' time when we'll make a start on getting the neck finished, I think. So until then, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.